fans and players. I think we are live now, so we should
Yes.
we can start. Okay, hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on post-COVID sports economy and the positive part sports can play in our lives and the larger economic ecosystem post-COVID. As we go through this terrible events taking place around us, sport continues to have an integral part in our lives. I've been reading some newspaper coverage recently, and as you've seen, a lot of papers, a lot of websites have been running interviews of sports personalities, talking about past cricket series, very popular cricket series, India Pakistan. They've been interviewing Pakistani cricketers about Indian stars and vice versa. They've tried to keep the engagement, entertainment alive. A lot of us who do not indulge in formal sports, I'm sure, do as basic as a humble daily walk. So physical fitness obviously is a very important part of our lives, especially during this time when health has become such a big prime concern. Related to that, organized sport has also provided us with immense entertainment, as we've seen over the last many years, especially in India, with the advent of IPL. Before that, the cricketing economy, and now with so many other sports that has viewers hooked. At last count, we had 7 or 8 major leagues running on TV. There is, of course, the IPL, there is ISL, the badminton league, there is the Pro Volleyball League, Pro Kabaddi League, Pro Wrestling League, table tennis. These are some of the leagues that I've been able to count, and I'm sure there are many more running. The three major ones, the big ones out of these, are obviously IPL, Kabaddi, and football, which have the most amount of traction. I was going through one of the reports done by GroupM, which says IPL last year in 2019 had a TV reach of 46 crore people. That's a huge number. That's almost half of India's adult population being exposed to IPL on television alone. This does not count digital reach. That's a massive number. PKL, which is the Kabaddi league, had across all its season 32 crore people touched in a year through television alone. ISL, which is the soccer league, had 16 crore people touched. So as you can see, the reach of sport is immense. The impact it has is immense, and India, fortunately, has also evolved into a multi-sport interest country. And now that the league and matches have been deferred or cancelled, the overall impact of this cancellation deferment on the Indian economy and overall sporting ecosystem is likely to be significant, goes without saying. As we have also seen some of the latest development, I'm told EPL is starting on 17th of June, so that's very good news. NBA is restarting from 31st of July, though in a curtailed season this year. Bundesliga is already back, and we've all read some interviews here and there which say that BCCI is also considering organizing some cricket matches, perhaps IPL behind closed doors in a September-October season, or one of the reports said it might happen outside India. So today's conversation is going to be centered around discussing the impact of COVID on the sporting ecosystem. And once we are out of it, what happens if we can do a bit of a crystal ball gazing. With me on the panel are four experts in the domain from various parts of the sporting ecosystem. I'm sure many of you know Vinit Karnik, who runs GroupM ESP, which is India's premier sporting consultancy, sport investment firm. Vinit and his team perhaps are involved in 70-80% of the sports investment decisions that take place in this country from an advertising point of view. Welcome, Vinit. Thank you for joining us. We have Amit Tiwari, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Havells, which is a large household appliances brand in India. They've been a very significant investor in sporting ecosystem in this country, with budgets allocated across sports. I remember Havells has been sponsor of IPL for many years now. We have with us Satish Menon, the CEO of the Punjab team of IPL. Thank you, Satish, for joining us.
Thank you.
IPL, as we all know now, in its this year would have been the 13th year, and the uh, IPL drives the uh, sports ecosystem in India. There's no running away from that. Jatin Paranjape, CEO and founder of KheloMore. KheloMore is about connecting people to their passion, which is sports, connecting people with various sporting arenas in the country. Jatin, as you all know, has also been a India cricket star. He's played for India. He's himself a passionate sporting icon. So welcome, Jatin. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Let me bucket this conversation in 4 or 5 areas, and then one by one we can take up the conversation. There are 4 5 angles I would, if I can put them on the table. First and foremost, what happens to fans. I was going through, Vinit, I was going through your report that you did in March, which said it's very important for league owners, for broadcasters, for team owners to keep fans engaged during the off season, because fan loyalty is built over time. And dare I say, for cricket that might not be such a big problem, but for other sports it might be. And even cricket at the team level, keeping fan engagement, fan loyalty during a season when you're unable to play is very, very important. So one is the fan part. Second part is, of course, the financial losses that teams, franchise owners, broadcast partners have had to undergo because of COVID. Third is the grassroots level investment that gets impacted because of, again, financial issues. Then how do teams and the players themselves get impacted because of this? And lastly, brands that invest in sports, especially brands that invest over time, which want a loyalty to be built associated with the sport, and suddenly you have so much disruption, it requires for you to restart the cycle all over again. So let me start with the first. One of the key reasons why sport exists is because of its fans. What do fans do, and what can team owners, what can broadcasters do to ensure fans are kept engaged during a period like this when there is no live sporting action? Vinit, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Nawal. Thanks for having me on the webinar. And yeah, absolutely relevant point. And actually, we are seeing a lot of broadcaster running some fabulous amount of sporting content, which people like us are queued onto, because in absence of a live sport, we have gone back to our libraries on various different OTT platforms, or could be on the television broadcast platforms who've been running a lot of repeat shows. But yes, I mean, the learning that we have from the COVID period, from a fan engagement point, especially in times like these, non-live content becomes a very, very important part. And I have been over the last couple of years very actively talking about India taking the center stage on and creating some very interesting ideas around non-live content, because I think we as a country haven't done enough in that space. So I'm sure a lot of the production community, the sporting community would have thought this the time that they have got. So I think non-live content becomes a very, very integral part. I mean, we have seen the show that NBA launched on Netflix, and the kind of fan following it garnered on social media in terms of the chatter. Now, if these kind of shows are developed in the Indian ecosystem, that possibly could have come handy at this point in time, right? So that's pretty much the scenario. I mean, what a fan wants from a consumption standpoint, we all know, and this is not only relevant for cricket, but it's actually more relevant for the emerging sport economy, in terms of how can they develop the sport on the back of non-live content. How can they create national heroes through non-live initiatives and make them relevant in the off season. So I think we need to spend some time, evaluate various different ideas and options in creating non-live content for times like these, Nawal.
Satish, what is the conversation you guys are having in your meeting rooms? Because with no clarity on IPL, how do you ensure that you keep your fans engaged, the interest levels heightened, uh, and the loyalty intact?
So I think for a large part, it's digital media. It's digital media that's playing a large part. We actually engage with most of our players. We take our key players and create interactions. We have, of course, daily posts, which is standard vanilla stuff that we have, almost on a daily basis. We have an average of about 3 or 4 posts a day virtually going in there.
Mhm.
Innovative stuff by way of, like Vinit said, content which is out of the box that we create, which keeps the interest going. um, that there's not much you can do beyond this, because to my mind, there's nothing that matches live content. I mean, why does one look forward to a game? I mean, the key to any match or anything is about contest. It's about the result. So end of the day, once the result is out, then the interest level is only that much. You see, so to that extent, we are all looking forward to having the live game, and the only thing we can do is to actually create a build up towards that. Beyond that, there's not much we can do with it.
Right. Amit, what's your opinion on that? Because brands also make a lot of investments to for having continuity of engagement with fans, and downtimes like these disrupt that continuity. Does Havells do anything, or do our brands? Have you seen brands doing anything uh, beyond just riding on live sports properties to keep the engagement going?
So thanks, Nawal. Good evening, everyone. I think, Nawal, before we get into what exactly brands do and all, there's also an angle which how does the consumer behavior have actually changed in last 2.5 months, which is very important to see. The fundamental change that has happened today, that consumer is actually redefining everything. So what is happening in the consumer balances, if you look into sports or engagement as an activity, every consumer is trying to redefine what exactly is the means of entertainment or engagement for them. How do we actually rebuild the entire ecosystem that you're actually trying to do for it? What does it actually mean? So indoor is the new outdoor in the entire ecosystem today, and our experience is coming indoor. So I don't care whether I'm actually able to go out and all, and sports in the entire entertainment becomes much valid. So I think 2 days back I've just gone through a report which is a Bazuba report. It's a marketing report which comes every 6 months, and which clearly says today also marketers, 40% of the people actually believe that the mainstream channel is sports. Whether you are doing a live sports, whether you are in streaming sports, but my engagement has to be very high when it comes to sports. Now, coming to a question in terms of what exactly is consumer looking, what brands are looking, how are they actually moving? So there are three basic buckets which are actually moving. Is everybody is looking for how I'm getting engaged, either on ground, on air. How is my engagement level actually moving? What would be my experience that I'm actually able to do? It's all about whether you do a virtual event, whether you do a direct event, whether you do on ground. It's all about what is the experience level actually I'm trying to build in the entire ecosystem, and how is my interaction happening? Am I able to see the virtual things that I want to see today? I can't, yeah, I know I can't go and participate in an on ground thing, but how I can actually move things. The point coming to the crux and why I'm saying all these examples to it is brands will still invest in advertising primarily on cricket, or sorry, on sports, irrespective whether it is live, whether it is non-live. Idea is what is the level of experience and engagement that we're actually trying to do. There's a small study which is done. I don't remember what exactly it is from. It is done from one of the, which says a target audience between 13 to 39, around 50%, close to 50% people really engage in last 2 months, and all the gaming content which is available across platform, which is on TV, which is on OTT, whether it is available on digital, whether it is gaming, everything. So there you can actually make, there's a lot of potential in the TG that can actually talk about on that.
Right. So yeah, I mean, keeping fan engagement going, audience or consumer engagement, as you're saying, during lockdown times, very important, and some of the team owners are already doing that. Let me come to the second and perhaps one of the very important aspects of this entire conversation, which is the financial impact of COVID on the sporting economy. Now, I was again going through some of the numbers, and as per estimates, the revenue of the Indian sports ecosystem is around $1 billion as of last year, which puts it in the range of around 7,000 crores. Out of which IPL alone contributes almost two-thirds of the revenues, around $600 million. Obviously, goes without saying, cricket is a very large part of that. And with IPL postponed and there's with little clarity on what is going to happen with this entire delay, there are 2-3 aspects that arise. First and foremost is what is the impact for the sports associations and the league owners. Second is what happens for the team owners with no fans in stadium. So, for example, we all know that ticket sales form a small portion in India as compared to, so, the Western economies of the overall revenues of teams. So even if one were to equalize that, that is still some revenue that goes away. Uh, and if there is talk about holding matches without fans, ground sponsorship is such an important part, such an important aspect of the earning of the league owners and hence the teams and the entire ecosystem down below. How does the value of ground sponsorship change? So let me take these 3-4 aspects of the financial impact one by one. First and foremost is we all agree, I think, that people are looking forward to watching live sporting action once lockdown opens. So there is no debate about what will be the kind of viewership or traction when it comes to sport. The important part here is twofold. One, if there is no fan in the stadium, Amit, how does that change things for you as a marketer, as an advertiser, as a brand which is wanting to invest in a sporting property? Let me start with you on this.
See, Nawal, Vijay actually said in terms of now every particular marketer and every particular allied partner, whether it is a sports firm or whether it's a team we really need to sit and rebuild and reboot what we actually need to do. We know what the situation is. We can't change that situation. And irrespective, I'll tell you a different scenario, just a slightly different from what we actually look for it. If let's say fans are being allowed to go to the stadium, let's keep the hand to the heart. How many fans will actually go today? Because the fear is so high that nobody wants to do at the cost of their health whatever they really want to look for it. So if you see that today we need to recreate what is the maximum engagement value that we can actually derive for the consumer, how we can actually maximize the bang for the buck that you really need to put and do the actual form of the entire investment that actually look for it. And if you compare last two particular seasons of, let's say, talk about IPL only, even if a, let's say, associate sponsorship presented on stars and all, your 50% cost was there primarily to do it on any of your, whether it is on any of your digital platforms to look for. But still brands are advertising. There are 224 brands advertising, let's say on a TV. There are half number of brands advertising on digital platforms, which itself is a big number to actually lock and talk about. So everything has to be recrafted, keeping in mind what exactly is the movement of the situation. We know the situation is the same situation what used to happen before 20th of March will not work. What has happened and worked for last year will not work. New means of engagement, new means of interaction, and new means of how we can actually have our brand recall much higher in this, because there will be multiple brands that will be gaining for the same momentum to build for. But you have to be smart enough in terms of creating your own ecosystem that can actually make a differentiation in the entire scheme that you actually advertise for.
So Vinit, what could those new means and ways of interacting with fans and viewers be? Your own report said that the overall sports sponsorship market in India alone was at around 9,000 crore mark in 2019. That's a significant number. And if it were to get significantly impacted because of COVID, we will obviously be much worse off. So what is the way to retain this kind of huge sum of money?
See, the number that you spoke about, 9,000 odd crores, is a culmination of on-ground, on-air sponsorship, both together, plus the celebrity endorsement piece as well, right? So, yeah, I mean, there is no shying away from the fact that there's going to be an impact, right? But the good news is that we are hoping and we are seeing things opening up now, and I think even if things come to a near normalcy, and even we look at any sport like an IPL or an ISL or a PKL this year without fans or closed door, I think it's fine, because any which ways in my view, I don't think any of the advertisers gave more than 20% weightage for the on-ground presence that they had
Right.
on match days. It was, I mean, television. I mean, it was any live sport is made for TV kind of.
That's right. Yeah.
and most of that value is derived from that. So I would not worry too much as long as things are opening up. And I think we still have enough time to get the lost ground back from an India perspective. I mean, I understand that worldwide things will never be the same because there have been some substantial scaled up events who have been cancelled. But in India, we haven't seen a cancellation yet. I mean, we may have some kind of an impact in the short term, but I think we have about good 6 months now to catch up on an overall revenue model. So, I mean, fingers crossed. I mean, if things come to normalcy, if there is not a second wave in India, I think we have a good amount of time to catch up with the lost opportunity in the last 3 months.
And I think the silver lining of this is that unlike the Western economies where a lot of the leagues run through the almost through the entire year, in
Right.
India, majority of them, leave alone Kabaddi, which has multiple seasons in a year,
Right.
majority of them have a 3 month, 4 month window in a year. So it is not that difficult to find that 3-4 month window any time of the year, depending upon no clash with other sporting events internationally or an Olympics or something else. So I think that goes in the favor of Indian leagues. So for example, badminton, which happens only once a year, wrestling league happens, we all know, once a year. Football again is only once a year. It runs for almost 3.5-4 months. But even if there is a delay, it is possible to fit it into a 12-month calendar rather than skipping it altogether, which might end up happening. For example, the baseball league in the US, they are having to curtail it because the months that have been lost for good. You cannot bring them back.
Also, Nawal,
Tell me, Vinit, when you yeah.
another point, Nawal, here was that, see, in India, the rainy season has already kicked off. I mean, we are seeing rains already for the last 3 days. Yeah. So technically speaking, we have only lost 2 months. Okay. So we have so March and April are months which are lost. I mean, so if things go well and if we are able to start August or maybe September, I think we will still be able to, but this is off season for live sport in India. So we need to, I mean, that's a good news.
That's right. Satish, let me jump to you now because, you are a team owner. You work very closely with the BCCI and the cricketing ecosystem. Obviously, what happens financially impacts every team. How do you see this play out? Do you think down the line, COVID will have a significant impact on the economic ecosystem of, cricket in the country, and what happens in the entire value chain?
First, I stand corrected. I'm not a team owner. I work for for a team. Okay. So to answer your point, no. So first, I just want to take up on what Amit said and Vinit said in terms of, and it's more Vinit than what Amit said about engagement, and Vinit said that sports is made for broadcast largely. While I agree in terms of numbers, I have a big broadcast background, so therefore that's true. But what sponsorship does is what Amit kept saying about engagement. At the end of the day, the ground sponsorship creates touch points for you to be able to connect, to be able to build a brand, use the salience of the brand to be able to rub off on the audiences and the fans and so on and so forth. So insofar as that is concerned, and the worry there being if there are no spectators on the ground, how does that happen? Much of those key elements that are normally at play will happen. And what we will do from this year on is we basically will use all our digital platforms to be able to kick off all those engagements. For example, we'll start looking at, for example, if it's a brand which has a specific target group, we will have carved out the target group in a manner in which we will cater to that core target group, attract them to the brand, find the brand requirements as far as those audiences are concerned, and create a connect and engagement on a long-term basis. To answer your other question, Nawal, which is one of, how is it going to impact, cricket per se or other sports per se? I would say that, it's a bit of a motherhood statement in saying that yes, as much as it would affect any other business, it will affect cricket or sports for that matter. But I would think that this disruption is very temporary. People are just waiting to get back. And more so with cricket because this is still a one-horse drawn sport in this country, despite the fact that we keep saying that other sports are on the rise. But the kind of numbers that cricket throw up is unheard of or unseen anywhere else in the world. I think it's the only country that can take,
Right.
So to that extent, I don't see a worry at all when it comes to cricket coming back. People are waiting for live sports, and I'm sure that they're just waiting for Star to bring back all the sporting properties that they may have. Yes, it'll bounce back. It's a matter of time, and India is a very resilient country. It's a matter of time before we back in the saddle. Is the way that I see it.
Let me come to Jatin now. Jatin, you're part of the ecosystem in a very interesting way. Uh, Apart from having represented India and having been part of team sport, you now also work with a lot of local sporting arenas. Uh, Though we know now that in many ways, sport, organized sport might come back soon in some form, even though it might be behind closed doors without fans in stadiums. But physical contact where somebody is required to go to an arena, I mean, you can't 500 people can't go to an arena and participate in sporting activities uh, uh, without keeping adequate social distancing. So how does that part of the piece, which is more personal in nature, get impacted beyond say something like organized sport? How does that play out?
Uh, I think, Nawal, it has a very, very big impact on sports participation. Let's not forget that sports participation is where the seeds of commercial success are sown. So you need to safeguard sports participation in terms of COVID-19. And there are two buckets in sports participation. One is your 5 to 15 kind of sports person in the age group of 5 to 15. The other part of sports participation is the amateur sports person. Mothers and fathers and college going kids who are playing amateur sport, as a substitute for going to the gym five times a week. They want to play at a football turf a couple of times a week because they can play box cricket or they can play a game of futsal. So I feel both these buckets are going to be hugely impacted. Like Amit said, one is when the lockdown lifts, but the other is the mentality. So if you look at the 5 to 15
That's right.
bucket, these decisions are taken by parents. Until schools open, me as a parent, I am not going to send my son and daughter to go out and play till school opens in all its entirety. So I think we are basically, from a business, to explain it from a business perspective, your financial year just went from 12 months to 6 months, essentially. So I think there will be things will fully start opening up around Diwali time, I think, and these are extremely challenging times for venue owners, for coaches, because you've got to look at the profile of these people, right? So most of the coaches in India are doing this as a second kind of job. They're either
Yes.
working in a bank, or they're working in some other institution. They are ex-sportsmen, and in their free time they are coaching. So this COVID piece could have a terrible impact on their mindset, because they might say that, hey, this coaching piece is too fragile to depend on from an economic perspective. Let me just go back and try and work in my company full time. That gives me more kind of stability. So what I'm trying to say is that to safeguard these kind of unorganized pieces, right? These are sport essentially at the back end is unorganized. So to safeguard these unorganized pieces, I think there needs to be a coalition. There needs to be a coalition of custodians across sports. So national sports federations working with the government, working with the BCCI to find out how they can rehabilitate the supply. Because let's not forget that the most threatened part of sport in India is the supply. You don't have enough cricket coaches. You don't have enough quality cricket coaches. You don't have enough football coaches. You don't have enough basketball coaches. So if COVID actually makes current coaches to leave coaching, then your graph on the supply side is going to go down. So I think what we are missing is a coalition of custodians who need to use this time to help sustain the supply side of sport.
Yes, I think government, thankfully for the last 4 or 5 years, has been very focused on improving the sporting ecosystem, and I'm sure once they have a handle on what's going on with the economy, reviving the sporting ecosystem will also be on top of their agenda. Vineet, let me come back to you and ask you another question. uh, it is you have a right point that ground sponsorship constitutes a small portion of or rather fan connect, let me use the right word, fan connect constitutes a small part of what a brand requires to do as a part of their sponsorship package. But what we also know, I was moderating a couple of panels with CMOs in the last couple of weeks. The sense I've also got is that a large number of brands are very deeply impacted economically. Hence, marketing budgets over the next 6 months to perhaps next 12 months will be under severe stress. And if marketing budgets are under stress, obviously the money that flows into sports from the brand side will not be the same. Some of the large sponsors who've committed 5 years deals, of course, will be staying. But since 70-75% of the money comes from season to season, that money, the pool of the money will get impacted. What's the sense when you talk to, because you guys work with a large set of clients across sectors, what's the sense you get from your set of clients in terms of how will investment into sporting properties pan out, say, over the next 3 to 4 quarters?
That's a absolutely fabulous question, Nawal, and I guess I mean the things that you're hearing from the marketing or the brand community is quite similar to what we are seeing. So the challenges they have currently, I mean the kind of the topic that we are discussing today is perhaps of least relevance to them, if you ask me in so many words, in terms of today's times. The the reason being the challenges that they are facing today is getting up to speed from the full-fledged production capacity in terms of getting the entire full production setup operational at this point in time. Parallelly, while the production setup comes to normalcy, they're looking at a massive infrastructure issue from a logistic and supply chain standpoint in terms of getting the goods to the right places from a retail standpoint. Okay, and then about the challenges that we keep hearing at a retail space in terms of sometimes it's open, sometimes it's shut, left hand side, right hand side, various different models, various states are talking about. So these are the first three challenges that any production or any CEO is going to be facing. Now, again, I'm seeing an opportunity here, an opportunity to possibly get our house in order because today, and because we're discussing sport and investments in sport, this is an off season for sport. Traditionally, if you look at 2019, post 24th or 27th of May, once the IPL final is over, you haven't seen any live sport or live event in India because it's rainy season, right? Now, how is the entire sporting ecosystem doing their setup in these 2-3 months and are prepared for a August and September kind of a month to start live action in terms of sport is the story back home. Okay, because I think if we can put our acts together, the advertising community or the brand community will be ready by then because they will be coming in fast. They will take about a month or maybe maximum 2 months to get their house in order in terms of their supply chain, their production capacities, and retail and stuff like that. So I think if we are keeping ourselves ready to start the live action maybe by end August or early September, I think that's going to be bringing a lot of positivity to the entire fraternity. And when I'm saying fraternity, I include myself. I include Satish, who represents a team. I include Amit, who represents a brand, and of course Jatin, who obviously is waiting for the entire setup to start up, right? So therefore, I think if we put our house in order and be ready for September or August end, I don't think the impact is going to be very, very high because I'm again repeating, this is off season. So while IPL is suspended, and if IPL comes back, as we are all hearing in the news and the chatters around I think the loss will not be too much.
Vineet,
That's the way.
my question is slightly larger. My question is that granted sporting action will be back, fans have only say 10-15% value in the entire marketing mix, but what do you do when a client does not have money? His business is very badly impacted. COVID has wiped off significant part of his top line. He's shaved off his marketing budget. If you had 30 sponsors last year, 10 of them are not even in a position to talk to you for sponsorship. So what happens from that larger point of view? It is not a question of whether a sporting property delivers viewership or fans or not. That is granted, but from a larger point of view, from an economic impact point of view, does that index of 100 become 70, 80? Naturally, it is not going to remain 100. So
Sure.
does it remain 80, 70, or does it come down to 60 or 50? What happens there?
So very difficult to put a number to that, Nawal. Okay, the reason I am a little optimistic about this is because, see, today we have seen a muted advertising on various different platforms. Okay, because today we are in a lockdown stage. Okay, I am talking about August, September. Okay, from a sporting standpoint, I think I mean, just hypothetically, let me paint a picture. Imagine if everything goes well and IPL starts in September 1st or second week. Okay, won't that bring positivity and
Sure.
reason for advertisers to advertise? Because
Yes.
by then they will also have to sell their goods, right, and services. See,
Yes.
because this entire, I mean, and I completely agree with Satish that I think a very short-term impact on Indian economy, because we have such a strong local demand. We have a very, very strong local demand. And therefore, in the shorter term, yes, there is a muted demand from the advertising community. But I think 3 months or 4 months down the line, I am pretty optimistic that things will start coming to near normalcy. And in that scenario, whoever comes first and whoever launches the first live action sport is going to reap benefits out of it. That's
Yes.
the way I'm seeing it.
Absolutely. That there is no denying that. Let me come to the next question now. Next point, rather. Again, since we are talking about financial impact, and since brands and advertisers invest significant amount of money, and since that runs the sporting economy, especially in a country like India, Amit Tiwari, what happens to the objectives that you want to do? Say, for example, you've been sponsoring a certain league, a certain team for a good part of 5 years, and suddenly you have so much disruption that the season gets cancelled, and for almost say 12 months you're disconnected with the fan. Does that create significant disruption in your plans in terms of how you saw that property delivering for you? Because as truth holds, you don't have so much money to go around that you sponsor all the leagues and hope that two or three of them will always be on at a given time.
So, Nawal, before getting into this question, I think what just to take back what Vinit was saying, and I'll have a little difference in what Vinit's point of view is. See, today it's not about, and as you rightly pitched about in the previous question, is if you talked about in terms of yes, let's say the league will start, the IPL will start, but today, do really the brands have the money to actually look for that? And second thing is, what will I gain today? What will be my particular objective, even if I, let's say, I sponsor XYZ team or XYZ sponsorship patterns on any of the IPLs, and what will be my particular objective that is trying to be fulfilled? Because if you see, if you run on a Jan-December calendar or you run on April-March calendar, financially your 50-60% of market is already gone. Do you really want to save the money? Because cash is, everybody wants to keep it, because that is what actually decide how do you want to move to your particular future. So I have a little disconnect whether really any particular brand should be thinking. Now coming to the second point, I've been discussing with a lot of other my particular counterparts within the community and the fraternity, because there are people who have actually put in 5 years, 2 years, 3 years commitment in terms of moving forward. There will also be some deals that already started about T20 World Cup, which was supposed to happen in the month of October and November. And the way things are moving, that yes, today the fans will definitely move on to a different space. There are other important and technology means which people are utilizing. I was just seeing a sample of this ESPN did a 12 hours marathon, which was absolutely good in terms of a mix of a live streaming as well as a proper content. And there was good amount of traction which was actually built into the entire. You're able to connect it. Obviously, your economies on scale will also be taken care in terms of the entire system that you're trying to build it. But the larger piece, which most of the marketers today are talking, and since I'm also representing those community today, performance marketing is going to the key for the next 8 to 10 months. If I'm able to get the return, if I'm able to get that particular leads, and if that converts into my particular sale, whether it happens through a digital video, whether it happens through a digital plus an online lead management system, that will actually defies, because today any money that is actually spent has to calibrate into the sales what you're actually trying to do. Otherwise, brand building exercise will definitely take a back step, because this is not the time to actually build a brand. It's not trying to build a visibility for it. It is about building the performance for your particular organization that will actually make a huge difference. That's
Well,
what
what if I pose the counter? Valid points, Amit. That's why I raised that with Vinit. But what if I were to give you a counterpoint, which is as follows? We've had significant disruption because of COVID. Sales have been impacted, companies' top lines have been impacted, because of which marketing budgets have been cut, because of which uh, a lot of the money has gone, as you're saying, into performance marketing. There is very little to go around for brand building. But come, say, September or October, 3, 4 months from now, one assumption we all have to make is that we will be out of this in 2 to 3 months' time. Out of the lockdown, I mean. I do not know how long the vaccine or the cure will take, but out of the lockdown, which will allow a large amount of economic activity to resume. Now, once we are in that condition, won't a brand actually want, which has been kind of in a silent period for a six, I mean, eventually you are running a business and you will also have to look at, the next 2 to 3 years and not just keep looking at the next month or the next quarter. Won't a lot of brands which have been silent and only looking at, who have been only looking at performance marketing, want to say, okay, hey, there is a big sporting property starting. Let me put my umbrella on that. Let me put my flag on that and own the big bang piece. Because as we all know, sports is not just about performance marketing. Sports is now about making that big announcement, making that big statement that, hey, my brand is well and active, my brand is aspirational, my brand is the one that you need to engage with. And a lot of companies, okay, I'm investing in the next 18 months, the past 6 months are gone, but now I need to invest in the next 2 years, and let me put the money on a large sporting event.
So, Nawal, just to bring back again a question for a question and bringing to your particular question, which you asked previously with Vinit, is in terms of, yes, definitely brands want to do it, but what would be the magnitude that you really want to invest today? If I really compare an apple to apple comparison, the investment that you used to do it a year back on the same property, the timing can different, the scale and the magnitude can be different. Do really brands ready today? The answer, keeping the hand to the heart, no, nobody will be ready to do that. What does that actually brings to the answer is that every property that comes up for a grab has to have be recalibrated and re-economized to the strength that will brands in today's scenario able to afford it. As you rightly said that this 100 will not be 70, and nobody knows today. Nobody can predict
That's
whether
right.
it's 50 or 60. Even from the same situation from the brand, nobody knows whether even after September or October, will I able to, or anybody will able to achieve that particular numbers? The answer is absolutely in a very great area to look for. So if really the opportunity comes, it has to be a very, very smart opportunity to look for. And obviously it has to be economized to the sense that people are able, the brands are able to afford and think about into the consideration set today. And that will actually define whether it will actually be an impact driven decision, or it'll more people will try more of a technology driven to be relevant, but won't be spending too much in the entire fray to be a launch or something to announcement value to bring it.
Satish, you guys work with large number of brands across categories, which specifically sponsor your, team jerseys and a lot of the other stuff. Are there any conversations you've had with these brands in the recent past, which can tell us what they're thinking?
Also, we have continuous conversation going. Not all of it is towards whether you want to stay back or not stay back. And as and I firmly believe, as much as my partners who are working with us, that that IPL is one of the best platform to be in. And not necessarily answering to this question of yours, but taking from what Amit and Vinit were saying. My take on this is, I'm sorry, I mean that's not a question that you posed to me, but all the same, I'd like to add my 2 bit to it in saying that, look, I mean, every brand has its own time frame. Every category has its own space. For example, even in a dull market, there are brands which need presence in some form or the other, or increased voice, share of voice. For example, in my opinion, we're constantly tracking the market, and we know for a fact that there are brands which have brands and categories which are going to do very well in the coming months. I mean, they will ride out the COVID pandemic and will definitely come on top of it.
Give us examples, not brands, maybe categories.
No, why not brands? Even brands. I'm saying that there are brands which are FMCG specific brands which have been doing very well, and probably you will see a lot of shift for all along. On sponsorship, you didn't have, or for that matter, even when it comes to sponsorship on broadcast, you've had not so much FMCG brands taking up sponsorships, but you may see that happen because they have a lot to compete for in that market. So definitely they'll probably push more money into it. So there's no yes and no to this. And, one has to, it's a process of discovery in many ways. None of us, I don't think we can look down and say, yes, this is how it's going to be and this is not how. It's going to be a very, very different market, as Amit said earlier. We got to innovate. We'll have to think of, different ways of being able to attract the consumer, go into the market. I see no worry about, not just about IPL, but any sport in the future. I mean, if anything, sport, because, sport in many ways, as I call it, it's anyway gives you an identity, as I call it, so everyone wants to be associated with some sport or the other. So to that extent, I don't see, so at the end of the day, the brand is going to chase that consumer or the customer. So there's no way that I see a downward trend when it comes to, there will be some highs and lows. There's always some trough. But we'll ride it out. And I repeat, at the cost of repeating, I'll say that this is all a temporary phase. And in our country, especially, I think it won't take that long for us to bounce back.
So Vinit, tell me, do you foresee a shift, at least in the medium term, or say the short term, not even the medium term, from high ticket investment price opportunities to slightly medium or smaller ticket items? So in sporting parlance, rather than the big bang sponsorship opportunities that would cost upwards of 50 crores, clients or a larger number of clients choosing the smaller ticket items of say 10, 15 crores. Do you foresee that happening at least for the next few quarters?
So what I personally think going forward, and because we've been put into a spot like this, I think every brand is going to be thinking about how his entire spend is going to be giving him exponential returns. Okay, so I think the entire measurement metric is going to be pushed upwards and challenged actually. So to me, it's about how are you going to be packaging multiple different platforms, multiple different entitlements, which will make a business case for advertisers rather than a brand building case. So, I mean, on one point, I agree with Amit that I don't think brand building is the right time at this stage, but it's about how am I going to be solving a business problem. And the reason for my optimism, Nawal, here is there are going to be a lot of problems that a lot of brands and categories are going to be facing. Now, if sports can bridge that gap and solve that problem for them, I don't think anybody is going to be shying away from that, whether it's through performance marketing, whether it's through on-ground investments, or whether it's through a combination of multiple layers around a marketing plan. I think as long as I'm able to solve a business problem for an advertiser, they will be more ready to listen to a plan like this. And another point in favor of India as a country is once things start looking up, and again, we are assuming things will look up post-August, maybe in September, October, it's going to be a festive season. This time, Diwali is going to be in second week of November, okay? So the entire thing has to come alive. And I completely agree with most of you guys that this is a temporary phase, and I don't think we are in this lockdown stage forever. And there has to be some kind of an optimism and positivity across borders, not only from an agency standpoint or a brand standpoint, but at a right holder's place. I mean, someone like a Jatin who would possibly speak to multiple different arenas, there has to be some kind of upliftment for everybody, right? And that's what I believe. I mean, it's going to be more of an ROI-driven, business problem-solving-driven approach rather than just about saliency or a brand-building-driven approach. So multiple pieces.
Jatin, Jatin, what are the action points? You said, we need 3-4 stakeholders to come together and work together to, work at the grassroots level. So what would be the 4-5 action points that you would put down for them?
I don't know about 4 or 5, but I can certainly cite a couple. I think if I put myself in the shoes of a custodian, a sports federation, for example, I would use this time to ensure that certification, training programs, all of that piece is covered with my supply side. I will try and raise the standard of my supply side. At the same time, I will look at technology to to manage my entire operations more efficiently. So I think that's one piece which is important. The second piece which I feel which is going to come out of all this is is a complete kind of alignment on the fact that technology is going to be a part of your coaching portfolio. So if you were conducting a cricket academy for 5 days a week, I think the physical part of it is going to be, the offline part is maybe going to be 2 days a week, and the rest of the 3 days are going to be supplemented by some kind of digital interface and technology. There's also another piece to the back end. So if you look at the entire world through a venue owner's perspective, say I own an AstroTurf facility with 8 pitches on it. I will try to use a platform like KheloMore.com to come in and help me, help more people discover that I'm present here, but also use marketing automation at the back end to retain my earlier consumers and to keep them coming back to my platform. So I think if you look at it from a demand and supply side, the two truths which are going to come out of this is the leverage of technology platforms and the leverage of digital overall.
Tell me, Jatin, since you're talking, let me ask you another question, which is very different from this, since especially since you've been a player yourself. I was reading a very interesting piece on New York Times last month, which was talking about high performance athletes who are competing in Olympics.
Sure.
And a lot of them, especially gymnasts, they have a very short window.
Yeah.
Unlike say cricket, where your careers can span 10, maybe 15 years, in some cases longer.
Yeah.
Individual sports allows you to have not very long careers, especially gymnasts, for example, who would typically in their entire careers participate only in a single Olympics.
Yeah.
Even you look at badminton players, their careers don't last at least the peak level for 10 years. 5-6 year window is the optimal for them when they are at a high. Now when you lose almost 6-7 months, which you can say one entire season, it's almost losing 10-15% of your peak performance of your life. How does a player deal with that? You being an India player yourself, what do you do? There's no playbook for this. You've not been in this position, but it is an extremely tough situation to be in.
So I think when you're an elite athlete, you ensure that you never lose anything given any circumstance. So if you're an elite athlete, you're 100% carrying some niggle or an injury or some strain with you, and this period can come as a boon for you, essentially. So where, for example, if you had to remain on the field, but now you don't need to remain on the field, you don't need to go under the knife. Just rest will kind of take care of that entire rehab piece for you. The second is that all elite athletes are going to come back fitter than ever before, because they have the time and the space to work on their entire fitness. The downside is that, Nawal, there is a difference between fit to play and fit to perform. So fit to play is fit to play, but these guys are high performance athletes. So the windows need to be built properly. You can't do with a 2 or 3 week window and say, okay, fine. I'm Kings 11. Satish cannot tell them that I'm going to get you a 2-week camp and you've got to jump into the IPL. No, it doesn't work that way. There is an entire kind of duration which you need to work through. But yes, I understand your point that there will be some unfortunate incidents. So if for example, if I was 37 years old and Tokyo was my last chance, at an Olympic gold, that potentially has gone 12 months later down the road. But support systems and trainers and strength and conditioning coaches and your advisors and your mental health professionals, they all tackle this piece, so there is no wastage anywhere. An athlete never looks at anything wasted. They just see it as more time to prepare for what they want to achieve.
Right. Satish, I read something interesting and I want to pick you up on that. In 2006, when the last COVID or the earlier avatar of COVID, SARS-2 hit, Wimbledon took out an insurance policy against such events happening in the future, by virtue of which today, though this year there will be no Wimbledon, but the financial loss to them will be negligible, or
Yeah.
very, very little, right?
But you must
Did
remember
any
that.
of the, sorry?
Yeah. I said they were just lucky because they've been paying a huge premium. If this had to continue and there was no COVID, they would have been down
Yeah,
by a huge
that's the
premium.
point of insurance anyway, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you
Yeah.
pay for,
Yeah.
1 in 100 or 1 in a
Yeah.
million event, and it happened.
Yeah.
Has there been any conversation in IPL team owner rooms about having taken out an insurance policy on these lines?
No, so force majeure is something that we've been looking at. Unfortunately, COVID was not. COVID hadn't become larger than life at that point in time. Although we did try to include that in our insurance, the deal that we are doing. But no, to be honest, there is nothing as yet. There is some conversation that we are having with our insurance companies. But I have my doubts because not now. Going forward, also I doubt whether COVID will ever become. I mean, a pandemic of that size will drive insurance companies out of business.
That's right. Yeah.
And I keep saying this, especially for teams like ours, for us, people like us who travel is going to be a big issue because I don't know how many insurance companies will include COVID in that if I make a trip to UK and back. So yeah. I don't have an answer to that.
Vinit, you have a view on this?
Yeah, it's a great learning, Nawal. And it all actually surprised all of us. And the kind of social media traction, the entire Wimbledon and its cancellation and the insurance policy got itself is a testimony that it surprised everybody across the world and not only in India. It's a great learning. We'll have to see. It's a conversation between the insurance company and various different stakeholders. And currently, whatever I'm hearing is exactly what Satish said. It's more about the force majeure and the implication of that. But again, the question is, did anybody think that a pandemic of this size and scale, which actually put the world to a standstill, would even think about? So, I mean,
Wimbledon. Sorry to interject, but Wimbledon is really an outlier. I mean,
yeah, sure.
At it, I mean, it's just that COVID happened and they just turned lucky.
Well, they took out the policy a few years back, so it didn't happen last year. But
2006 onwards, my friend.
That's right. Yes.
That's a long way.
Yeah.
It's a huge premium to pay.
See, from a Wimbledon's point of view, they will say they had the vision and had the approach to think about extreme cases like these. I mean, that's going to be from their point of view, and the rest of the world is going to be taken as learning. I mean, it's always a two-way situation, isn't it?
Okay, let me hop on to some audience question. There is a question for Mr. Menon from KS Narahari. Mr. Menon, if IPL happens in September, October without live audience, will you reduce the payments committed to players and the support staff?
No, I doubt it.
Okay, that's as direct as it can get. Another question from Raghav Nagpal. My question is from a brand point of view. Do you think the price of acquiring some rights would be considerably cheaper than before? And would this present to you with the opportunity to invest more as cost of leveraging rights would be less due to activations going digital?
I think
is that addressed to me?
Amit.
If you actually see from a brand, any cost that will actually have a new cost, there has to be a new ways to look for it. And there won't be any baggage for what it used to pay before, and that you have to start from whatever it needs to look for. If the engagement levels, in the interactions level, and if the interest level are taken care, definitely brands will look for it. But to answer that, definitely the price has to have a very, very different role to play, not what it used to be before.
Vinit, do you have anything to add to that?
See, look, there are two ways to look at this question. One is from a media rights point of view, and one is from a investment that comes from an advertiser point of view. In both the cases, Nawal, I think, as I said earlier, the rupee will have to work quite harder than before, at least for the next couple of years. 2020, and I would include 2021 also, right? So therefore, there's going to be a lot of closed door conversations in terms of how do I add value to the entire piece and how can I help you build your business rather than how do I reduce cost structures. So it's not about the cost. We are all here to do business. As long as I'm building or putting a business case in front, money has never been a problem. So it's going to be more of a closed door conversations about how can I help you better your business in the next 1.5 year rather than how do I reduce the price.
Right. Let me also look at now what are the opportunities that come out of COVID for us, for the sporting ecosystem. Obviously, it provides us with an opportunity to uh, deeply integrate technology into the entire sporting space. Like Jatin said, coaching, part of coaching can go online, fan engagement can go online. If there are no fans in the stadium, it gives you an opportunity. I was reading an article on Indian Express 3 days back, where a company which developed some AR VR technology for the basketball league is also planning something similar for Indian sporting leagues, where a Oculus kind of system, when worn on the head, can provide you much deeper experience of being in a stadium as opposed to just watching linear TV. What are the other things, for example, from a brand point of view, Vinit, if I were to ask you, what are the opportunities that brands can see in this in terms of engaging their audience, their fans better?
See, look, Nawal, there is no debate that you can't take away the joy of watching any sport live in the stadium. Okay, so that's the first point. I mean, you just can't look at it from that point of view. I think from I mean, I've also been reading about technology a lot and the impact and the leverage that you can have on that. See, my only point on technology is that remember, technology has to be simple. Okay, it can't be complicated from a production standpoint. It can't be complicated from an audience standpoint. So it has to match with the expectation of the players, the coaches, and it has to deliver a much enhanced consumer expectation, right? So from that standpoint, it has to be reassuring to the fans about how the
Yeah.
personal data of fans can be protected, how the identity, how can we identify the needs and expectation of fans and users before deploying any technology. So a lot of homework needs to be done before you actually deploy a technology. Okay, otherwise you can just build certain things and it can just go south. And we don't have some great India examples on building technologies. So I mean, I again saying we have got 3 months before we get into any conversations. I think we should use this time to test a lot of these things offline. And I'm sure, I mean, as most of the advertisers are going the digital way in this, I mean, technology will be one very important aspect of advertiser wanting to engage with their consumers through tech, and it's already happening today. How is sport going to be leveraging that is the question one needs to ask. And it has to be a combination of multiple trial and error things at this point in time. And I'm sure someone like Satish can build on this, because I'm sure they must be thinking about lots that they can do when and if IPL happens this year and without fans in Mohali. So I mean, maybe Satish, you can take this from your preparedness, but I think there's going to be a lot of trial and error that needs to happen between multiple people at this point in time.
There's another question for Satish, which is, with no ground activations, no gate revenues, no merchandise, and no F&B revenue, and no free passes, how would team owners look to diversify their revenue streams?
Diversify.
Yes. Where else can you bring revenue from? Of course, you're getting money from the central kitty. There is sponsorship money. Anything else that you guys are looking at doing?
No, digital is the only space, and as Vinit was saying, we are looking at various methods of slicing and dicing our fans at this present moment. How much of it will end up with with garnering revenues or not, we are not so sure. We are in that experimentation mode, but a lot of time and energy is being spent on that. But to answer this gentleman's question, no, there are only about the 4 or 5 sets of revenue streams. I mean, 3 of the most prominent ones, of course, we all know of. But thankfully, in this country, sponsorships and broadcast, share that comes to us is substantial. So it's not as if that it'll completely kill us if the ticketing doesn't happen in 1 year. We'd like to see we'd like to engage the fans. We'd like for the TV audiences to watch. They've been deprived of any form of live sports. We'd love for them to get back and watch some good games. There will be some compromises. We'll make that compromise this year.
Correct. So we are out of time. So before we log off, one last final question to all of you. We've had sport in India being run in a certain manner in the last, 15, 20 years. If you were to rewind back, I mean, COVID is in a way, a lot of ways reboot, reset, so to say. If you were to rewind and look at all of these years, what were one or two things that you would, want to do differently if you were doing it again? Vinit, why don't we start with you?
So differently in terms of what, Nawal?
The way the sporting business has been run from a sponsorship point of view, from a economic management point of view, uh, how would you do things differently now if you were to do it again? Or what is the change you would like to see in the sporting economy? Let me put it differently.
Okay. So, I mean, as the I just take the previous question and answer this one. So I would like to see a couple of more revenue models that would be built into the entire ecosystem. Okay. And we have got tremendous amount of learnings from the global sporting ecosystem. I mean, if you look at the European sporting ecosystem, or if you look at the North American sporting ecosystem, there are lot of avenues other than the three obvious avenues that we all speak about. So I would think about how can I build multiple revenue models on the back of digital and tech. Okay, so that's an experimentation I would love to see and love to be a part of from this country's economy standpoint. I would definitely look at more ROI driven and a very ROI driven approach to the entire sponsorship and the media rights ecosystem. Currently in India, when we spoke about ROI, we only looked at measured value. Okay, I would love to see how we are pushing the envelope and look at it from a perceived value point of view, because then that
Right.
helps advertisers build better ROI. So not also ROI not only driven by media and television, but how can I possibly go to the boardrooms and say that this sponsorship or this particular initiative of mine have actually helped me build lot of value which is intangibles. Okay, so when I say perceived value, I actually compare it with intangibles, because what is tangible is the media value, right? So I would like to see more of these detailed analytics that comes into play and defines a very sharper role for an advertiser to spend their money. So these are the two things. One is the multiple revenue models on the back of digital, and second is a very strong ROI driven, data driven exercises that will possibly answer the unanswered questions of intangibles. So two things, Nawal.
Fantastic. Amit, from a advertiser point of view, what are the things you'd like to see differently?
I think first and the foremost is and most of the advertisers, including me, I would say we were always swayed away by going in terms of the impact of the property. One thing which is actually learned from this particular thing, more than impact, which has to be what would be the interaction level of the activity, irrespective, it may not be the number one activity, number of sports to be done in that particular country and all. I think that will bring a lot of science in terms of what should be the affiliated audiences that you really want to go for, what should be the affiliated reach that you want to go for, rather than just going for an impact or the halo effect of any property to look for. Second thing, what should be the affordability today? Because that will be a question asked again and again for next 2 or 3 years. What would be the affordability metrics that you want to do, and what would the objective that you're trying to drive from each and every object, each and every money that you're actually trying to spend? It may not be a long-term commitment. Definitely going forward will not be a long-term commitment. It will be tried and tested every property, whether it is through technology, whether it is through digital. But idea is to what is the outcome that you're trying to drive, which will make and which will make people a lot of cautious and going forward may not making a large commitment in terms of year or 2 year or 3 year deal, but seeing every season and then moving ahead from there. That's from my side now.
Right. Jatin, let me come to you now.
I think just looking at it solely from the supply side, education of coaches uh, and standardization of delivery. I think these are the two areas which should have been taken up. It's not late. It can be done, but I think delivery, standardization of delivery, and education of coaches, thereby increasing the funnel on the supply side. These are the two things I would look at.
Who can be the flag bearer for that?
Custodians of the sport, the BCCIs, the All India Football Federations, in partnership with the league team owners.
And what is the role the government can play in this? Any constructive role the government can play in this?
Absolutely. I mean, India is the youngest country in the world. A lot of kids are playing sport across the ecosystem. Only 0.001% of them play for India. The rest can be involved in sport and coaching and operations and the other piece.
Right.
So I think this is the time for sport to take a leap and try and be recognized and get an industry status. I think a lot of funneling will happen just with that one move from the government.
Right. Satish, you get the last word.
So in so in some ways, I would second what Vinit said, but I would probably try and fine tune that a little more to suit my needs. I would say that unlike any other country abroad, I mean, for overseas, if you look at sporting properties, sponsorship plays a very important role. When I say sponsorship, I'm talking about team sponsorship, nomenclature, and so on and so forth. I think there has to be a model where you can weigh the not in an intangible fashion, but in a tangible way, be able to weigh the pros of a sponsorship and how the association rubs off on the brand in a manner in which it benefits the brand. There are some loose methods of doing it, which some of us use in the marketplace, but I wish there was a body which could mathematically work on this and help brands grow with the naming rights and nomenclature of these. Going forward, the only thing I would like to see happen in the future is that we are allowed to build more on digital, and therefore we have more access to content, if I may use the term for want of anything better, because content is going to be a huge part, and as Amit said earlier, engagement is key. More than anything else, reach is one part of it, but engagement is becoming equally important. And we carry these assets with us, and those are the guys who make you stick to the game. It's the sport. And for us to have access and engagement to these assets that we carry, if we are allowed more, I'm not talking about live streaming or I'm not talking about live game, but beyond that, if we are given an opportunity to be able to use this to the benefit of our sponsors, it will help us a lot.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for a fantastic conversation to all of you. I think for me, the key takeaway is threefold. One, sport is alive and kicking. We are all desperately wanting for it to be back soon, and it will be back soon. Fans in stadiums or fans at home, the passion, the engagement that sport generates is not going away anywhere. Yes, there is an economic downturn likely to happen over the next few quarters. Having said that, sport is one of the unifying ecosystems in a position to attract brand money, to attract investments from brands than any other ecosystem. Most importantly, sports in the larger economy and the psyche of the nation plays a very, very important role. I think the role that a lot of us underestimate. In fact, there's a CIA government report which was released at the CI sporting event last year in October, which said India has an opportunity to create a $10 billion sporting economy, starting from the grassroots level, going all the way up to the topmost level, with a employment generation, direct employment generation opportunity for 10 million people. So I think the government also sees this as a very serious ecosystem, which is not just khel kood, so to say, which can be tackled with later, but which should be dealt on priority immediately as part of their plan to get the economy kick-started. With that positive note, let me thank all of you. Satish, thank you, Vinit, Jatin, Amit, for taking your time out. And I hope the Khelkood starts very soon and we are back at least onto our TV screens, glued on. Till the next time, thank you everybody for joining us. Goodbye from all of us.
Hey, thank you all of you guys.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much. Thank you
That
so
was
much.
really,
Thank you.
yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.